all of you a happy new year. So we have quite an interesting topic to get onto this evening. But before we make a start on our topic for this evening, I do have some notices, some reminders for you, our membership, to take note of. First up, those of you who are have not paid your yearly dues, we ask that you please make yourself financial at the office, or you can make payments online. You can call Stacy or go onto the website for information in that regard. But we would like to encourage our members, please, to make your yearly payments. Also, we would like to offer or extend to you the opportunity to be a sponsor for the BAP for this coming year. This is our 60th anniversary year, and we will be having some celebrations later on in the year between September and October. But of course, BAP's works extends across the entire year, whether it is having interactions with students who are interested in doing engineering or supporting other causes of an engineering nature. BAP is called upon constantly to be engaged and to do different things. So we would like to offer you this opportunity to engage with us in a sponsorship alliance. Again, you can give Stacy a call at the office, and there are some packages there that we can go through with you if you are so interested in pursuing that avenue. So, 60th anniversary celebrations, we expect that you will be hearing a lot more about that in the coming year. We ask that you stay tuned, keep an eye on your emails and the various platforms on which we send out information on. And certainly you should be seeing that information in a very short time as to what we are looking specifically to do in terms of the celebrations for the 60th anniversary. As part of the 60th anniversary, there is also the Panama trip, which is coming up at the end of April into May. When I checked with the travel agent yesterday, there were still a couple spaces available. So if you are so inclined and you would like to join the team of persons who are going to Panama as part of the 60th anniversary celebrations, we ask that you will reach out to the travel agent and make that known as soon as possible. I believe payments are due by the 23rd of this month. So it's not too late. You can definitely reach out. Sorry, is it the 23rd? Yeah, the 23rd this month. So it's not too late. You can still get onto the tour, and we ask that you reach out to the travel agent and avail yourself of this fantastic opportunity. Coming up, we do have the rescheduled pre-Concord tour. That is going to be in I think, the first Saturday in March. So we will be sending out a revised flyer to that effect. And this should be a really interesting tour. I want to encourage all of our engineering partners to definitely come out to this tour. Both those of you who may be not only on the civil and structural side in terms of the product they produce, but certainly those of you who are in the electrical and mechanical side, the plant itself will have some interesting features that you may want to come and check out. So we would encourage you to make it out to that tour. Preconco are bringing in their structural engineer from Italy. There will be a briefing and there will be a tour of the operations. So we ask that you avail yourself of that opportunity, and we will be sending out a revised flyer within the next week, just advising you of the timings and confirmation of the date, which I said will be the first Saturday in next month, March. So we are about to go into this evening's topic, which is re-engineering sugar. I'm sure most of you would have heard of the recent acquisition in terms of the sugar industry operations in Barbados by a group, co-op group, which I'm not going to steal their thunder. I'll let Trevor tell you all about it. And that has obviously been making the news, not only in Barbados, but certainly around the region, as it potentially sets up an interesting model in terms of how sugar operations are ran. So this evening, we're going to have a presentation by Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Browne, who is not acting this evening as the president of BAP, but certainly as the chair of the new entities that have been formed to run and manage our sugar production here in Barbados going forward. So without further ado, I just want to remind you, this is a CPD event that is a continuous professional development event, and it carries a value of 2 CPD points. And we ask that you contact our secretariat to avail yourself of those points, especially if you are a member of another professional body and may need proof that you would have attended this evening's event. In terms of housekeeping, we will have our presenter, and he will present for between 30 to 40 minutes. And then we're going to have an open session where we will entertain questions to the presenter about the content that has been presented this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this session over to Lieutenant Colonel Browne. Colonel, over to you, sir.
Okay, good evening, fellow engineers, guests, indeed to all participants. Thank you very much, Vincent. On behalf of Co-op Energy, I want to thank you and your education committee, and of course the overall BAP Committee of Management for giving us this opportunity to discuss the work that we are doing with what we call co-op ownership in Barbados and with the sugar industry in particular. So that my objective today really is to give a general update on the progress that we've made so far with this very interesting project, on the challenges faced, but mostly I would suggest to invite the active participation of everyone here and everyone that they know in this exciting future that we envision for the sugar industry and indeed the sugar and energy business in Barbados going forward. So if you don't mind, I can go ahead and share my screen.
You most certainly can, sir.
So just let me know when I'm up and I can actually get going.
You are up.
Right. So I'm calling it the re-engineering sugar in Barbados. And if you have any idea of the history of Barbados, you probably understand why we would want to look at it from that actual perspective. So that, just to give a little bit of the background for those who may not be aware, and just to set the framework for what we have found and what we're trying to do. So for almost 500 years now, certainly since the 1640s, Barbados has literally been defined by sugar and by sugarcane. The sugarcane fields, the plantation complexes and the plantation structures, the mill infrastructure, certainly the factories, all nesting in the slopes and the valleys of the island testify to this fact. From that time, you may be aware that increased European demand for sugar created an interesting socio-economic revolution globally, resulting in an insatiable appetite for sugar, which could now be more readily available to the European markets. When combined with the sugarcane's intensely demanding and unforgiving agro-industrial process, this condemned the enslaved workers who were responsible for raising the crop to lifelong physical, economic, and psychological abuse that has become the folklore of Barbados and other similar countries. Historically, the sugar industry has traditionally been owned and managed by the private sector. And there's a little graph at the top. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Production peaked and profitability peaked in the 1960s, when production levels were actually at their highest and the industry was actually extremely profitable. At that time, some 50,000 acres were harvested annually from over 100 individual plantations, more than 10,000 small farms, and there were about 16 sugar factories operating at the peak of the industry. In the 1970s, mainly as a result of declining profitability from cane growing, and we could talk about that. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons. The introduction of alternative beet sugar and alternative corn fructose sweeteners resulted in a reduction in the price of sugar and a decline in the profitability from growing cane, and therefore there was a decrease in the land planted in cane. And This continued into the 1980s with a further drop to the area harvested down to something like 34,000 acres. And as cane production declined, obviously, factories were forced to close, down to 9 factories by the end of the 1970s, 5 by 1989, 2 by 2011. And we all know that as we speak, it is only Portville significantly grinding cane in Barbados. But look at the production chart over the centuries is particularly interesting, and you can actually see the rise and the fall of sugar in Barbados. I mean, for over the year, for all those centuries, it has been a significant mainstay, and it has been bedrock really for foreign exchange and things like that. But the 60s really were the king areas for sugar in Barbados. In 2023, after just 2 years of reforms that I will talk a little bit about, there was actually something like 18% increase in cane production and a 38% increase last year, in fact, in sugar production over the year before. So some things happened to cause a turnaround in the last 2 or 3 years, which we will talk a little bit about. But just as a background, you can have a look at how production varied over the centuries in Barbados and where we are now, just under 30,000 tons, I think it was last year. The fact of the matter is that sugar is an ideal crop for Barbados. It suits the soils, the climate, the topography. Barbados is better suited for sugarcane production than for most other crops. And this is probably why the sugar industry played a pivotal role in the economy and why Barbados really has been relatively successful over the centuries and the decades. This, obviously, after a while, tourism and other international services took precedence, but the foundation was actually built by sugar. The 2015 BAMC report to Parliament, because BAMC is a government institution. It was created in, I think, 1992 and started operating in 1993. But there's a report, none is public, it's on the internet. It paints a grim picture of the state of the industry around that time. As I said, BAMC was incorporated in June 2022, and it was actually put in place because of the decline, the then privately owned sugar industry was in a dire state. BAMC was meant to actually bring government support to save the industry from total collapse, as happened in some other Caribbean countries, for example. But just to give you an idea of the state of operations at that time, they were looking at a total comprehensive loss for the year of something like $44 million and something like 32 million in 2014. And total liability, the liabilities in the industry exceeded the assets by something like $261 million. There were a number of attempts to restructure the industry. CIRP, there's so many that we can name. And actually, in the next, I think I went too fast there. In this particular chart, the chart I thought actually shows Jamaica, the situation in Jamaica, and that was I'm just trying to show that this was a general trend throughout the region. It was not just peculiar to Barbados. But the decline of the sugar can be characterized in a number of steps. Very, very profitable, as we said, in the 1960s, and then a steady decline. But many interesting strategies have been employed. BAMC, as I said, was created in 1992 to absorb financial losses and to save the industry and to bring restructuring. Then Booker Tate and some contractors from the UK were brought in to provide management services at one stage, and then they're converted into actual management services and consultancy operations during different phases of their operation, which ended around 2004. With the industry not in too much better of a state than it was in when they actually came, to be quite frank. By 2015, losses, as I said, were at about 44 million per year. Liabilities were hugely exceeding assets. But in recent years, government undertook a 5-year plan to actually rehabilitate the industry and to actually divest itself of those ongoing expenses. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened over that 5-year period that's coming to an end now this year. But you should note that during that period, government subsidies have been in the region of $30 million annually. So you can see why government would want to exit from that kind of situation. So let me move to the other end now to talk about Co-op Energy. Who is Co-op Energy and why we're interested and how we got involved? So Co-op Energy is an investment cooperative. A cooperative, as the most popular co-ops in Barbados are credit unions, have been phenomenally successful over the last 30 years. We all know now that the number of credit unions in Barbados who in the last 30 years have grown in assets from $1 or $2 million to $3 billion in assets. But far beyond the assets, the whole question of the human resource, the management resources, and the kind of infrastructural development that they've actually brought to bear in Barbados and have been quietly successful over the years have been very impressive. In 2019, government announced the launch of the Barbados National Energy Policy. The intent being to wean Barbados off very expensive fossil fuel imports and to move towards renewable energy where we can actually source energy from the sun, the wind, biofuels, from local sources. Very, very ambitious plan. The co-op movement became very interested in that from an energy perspective because we became aware of the kind of returns that are routinely standard in the energy investment business. Coming out of that, the cooperative movement collectively, and this is with the help and the guidance of the cooperative department, the Ministry of Energy, the Fair Trading Commission, the Financial Services Commission, the cooperative department, the BREA and BAP was actually very much involved in that, had a number of consultations, the result of which they all concluded that a cooperative ownership model ideally suits the needs of the citizens of Barbados in a projected Barbados sustainable energy future. What we saw was a situation where there were opportunities for investment in the billions of dollars going forward with outstanding returns that was so high that they attracted phenomenal international investment interests. And the cooperative movement felt that this is something that we should be interested in, and we should put ourselves in a position to benefit from that. Coming out of that, the Barbados Sustainable Energy Cooperative Society Limited was actually launched under the leadership of the collective movement, co-op movement in Barbados and these other agencies. Called Co-op Energy for short, because we didn't want to be called the Barbados Sustainable Energy Cooperative Society Limited or the long initials and all that. So it is also legally Co-op Energy Barbados. And the intent of Co-op Energy Barbados really is to be the focus point of the cooperative movement in bringing cooperative ownership to the energy business in Barbados. What we've been doing so far in this is now 4 years going on 5, we have been interested in renewable energy. And like everyone else, we were very interested in things like PV farms, wind farms, even biofuel and you know, types of generation. And we actually had very interesting and in-depth discussions with a number of key international players. And we actually have memorandum of understanding to work with a lot of these players as they develop energy in Barbados. People like Blue Circle Energy out of Canada, the HDF out of France, who will build in the hydrogen plant in St. Philip, the Barbados National Oil Company Limited, and National Terminals Limited. We actually had extensive discussions, and we do have an agreement with them. The problem with this situation so far is well known because the renewable energy market kind of ran into a storage situation that is now being resolved. So that has not gone as far as we had projected. We also spent that time at the urgings of some of our members being involved as interveners in the Lightning Power rate hearing. The intent there, of course, was to learn more about the energy market in Barbados, to be aware of how it works and what the potentialities were and all that. But that turned from what we projected to be a 3-month exercise into a 2-year exercise that is ongoing, but a very interesting exercise. During all this, we also became aware that there were a number of state-owned enterprises that were due to be divested by government. Among them, CBC, the BNOCL, and notably the BAMC. And I highlight that one because there were a number of reasons why we were particularly attracted to that particular opportunity. The other thing that we actually did is we started our first joint venture investment. This is something called Co-op Electric, where this is a company that imports electric and hybrid vehicles. And that's a relatively small scale operation, but it's been going, that's how we use that to wet our feet and get to understand business, and that's been going actually quite well. So I think it probably went further, didn't they? Right. As I said, that's not we initially targeted PV and wind, but it soon became clear to us that this was unsustainable because of the problems with storage, and we kind of backed out of that. So we never became involved in that. And we became much more interested in things like biofuel and in access to lands that provide for utility scale RE installations. It's clear, we all know that the actual cost of developing utility scale PV type operations and wind operations is 50% of what it costs to do it on a smaller scale, little farms and little fields all over the place. So we became very interested in the BAMC option because it provided interesting opportunities in energy. So even though BAMC came with a notorious history of losing money and being unstable and all that, when we factored in, as you will see later in our SWOT exercise, the benefits and the opportunities, it actually made a lot of sense to actually become interested in that. To cut a very long story short, over the last year or so, the Barbados Agricultural Management Company Limited, BAMC, has terminated its production and agricultural operations effective December 18th, 19th, the 18th, so we to go from the 19th, 2023. And two new privately owned companies, the Barbados Energy and Sugar Company Limited, BESCO, and the Agricultural Business Company, ABC, were formed to take over the operations previously run by BAMC. The ownership of ABC and BESCO are outlined before. They're equally 55% owned by Co-op Energy Barbados, 25% owned by the government of Barbados, and interestingly, 20% owned by the present and the former workers of the BAMC who would have made contributions to the sugar industry over the years. So the government took a decision to allocate fairly significant ownership equity, amounting to 20%, to the existing workers who, for the first time, have now become shareholders, meaningful shareholders in this operation going forward. So there are two companies, similar makeup in terms of equity, one dealing directly with BESCO, takes control of the Portville factory itself on 30 acres of land. It is now the only sugar factory in the island. And obviously, we've taken control of all of the operations, the factory itself, the land, the auxiliary equipment, the factory equipment, spares, sugar stocks. So all that operation is now under the control of BESCO. In the case of ABC, this amongst the various farms previously managed by BAMC, we've now amalgamated them into 5 what we call agricultural farms, with a total acreage of something like 4,500 acres. There were 178 employees when it was handed over. This again includes all of their auxiliary equipment, and it's quite extensive farm equipment, very modern equipment, recently we've come to find. But a number of, I should put that in inverted commas, highly frustrated, but very qualified and experienced staff who are excited about the new opportunities. Frustrated because in many cases, what we've been finding is that, and I guess all staff tend to be like this, they felt that over the years, they always had ideas of how this thing could work, but nobody listened to them. And what we are promising is that those days are gone, we will now be listening. Obviously, one of the first things we did was to do our strength, weakness, opportunities analysis. It's a very, very, very interesting exercise. The strengths are clear. The opportunities are easy to pinpoint. I mean, we just highlighted the top 7 of all these. The weaknesses were glaring, and actually, if you listen to the press and those people who didn't have access to all the information, it was very interesting, the kind of weaknesses that they saw that said that this should never work. Just to highlight a few, in terms of strength, obviously the control of significant land assets is a major coup from an energy point of view, as I touched on before. The historic significance of the industry to Barbados, we felt in itself is a major asset. For 500 years, Barbados has been defined by sugar, and the opportunity to be a major player in that significance going forward is nothing to actually sneeze at. So we were very interested in that. Obviously, the purchase price was very attractive because, to be quite honest, government was finding itself with a very expensive annual bill just to keep it going, and we're keen and very amenable to partner with it on the very reasonable terms. So we were very, I mean, I'm not going to go into all the details, but the purchase price has been actually quite attractive. But then there's a sociological value for the co-op movement. This here was an opportunity to create a situation where ownership, after 500 years of being a wealth-driven thing, can now be turned around to be a co-op driven thing, where instead of a few rich people owning large percentages of national assets, we now have an opportunity to create a situation where large numbers of poor people, by small contributions, can now own significant national assets. And this has been a major step in that direction, which I'd be happy to talk about. In terms of opportunities, well, the opportunity in the ER market, in the RE market, is what actually drove us to be interested. The opportunity to establish the concept of cooperative ownership, as I just said, to demonstrate the value of such ownership, to invert that 500-year paradigm that drove Barbados, that made Barbados into a plantation society, where plantations own 90% of the land, and the other land that nobody wanted is where everybody else resided. We now have the opportunity to actually turn that around in a fairly significant way. Significantly, to create safe and attractive investment for the cooperative movement. That's a particular problem that we have in the credit union movement and in the banking sector, where there are very strict controls on how you can invest. So to the extent that we are now able to create an entity that can take those risks and allow the co-ops and to collectively invest in a much safer way in co-op energy, well, co-op energy takes any kind of business risks. And there are some business risks in investing, of course. So this creates now an environment where we can actually attract people to take small steps in investment, build confidence, because it is an investment that wealth is built, not in savings. In savings, you build other people's wealth. And of course, to protect the rights of the sugar industry workers, we were concerned, and they were very concerned, that the way things were going for the last decades, it was clear that the industry was on the way out. And we have been able to create an environment where we actually think we can safely allay that fear. In terms of weaknesses, the key one, of course, was that the reputation for the industry for being a big money loser. And you can see why, because of the government subsidies. But in my next slide, I'll show you, or my next two slides, I'll show you how we actually was able to destroy that myth. Clearly, the operations in the industry have been inefficient. There are so many things that are happening in the sugar industry traditionally that happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So in the year of AI, we actually have a number of things happening just like they did in the 1940s and 50s, and especially in the 60s when they were successful. Obviously, that has got to change significantly. So those are some of the weaknesses. And the threats were also very easy to split. The lack of self-confidence within the co-op movement for investments is identified as a major threat from our perspective. As I said, the way to building wealth is by investment in productive, successful enterprises. What we have done in the credit movement extremely successfully is to mobilize savings. What that does is to provide funds for other people who are willing to invest, to make a killing, while, as we all know now, the interest rates on the bank on savings are, well, zero. There are, of course, some regulatory and political roadblocks. Anytime you want to do something that has not been done before, there's that kind of a challenge. There's a reluctance on the part of Barbadians generally to convert savings on which they're getting 0% to investments, which we have demonstrated consistently gain over 10% return on investment. But obviously, it's going to take a while to get Barbadians to understand the value of taking that risk and making those and benefiting from those returns. Obviously, climate change and impacts on the industry, and the weather is an impact. If you had a major hurricane, it would be a problem. Our position is, of course, that we will meet those problems as they come, but we've made provision as much as possible, but those things will happen and you have to live with some of those issues. Of course, there was some resistance from the traditional owners who, well, obviously, I mean, were concerned about losing the traditional benefits that they had, but that was really a main thing. And the more we've interacted with the traditional owners, the more comfortable both we and they are that what we have brought to the table is an opportunity for everyone to be more successful. And of course, there's the threat of failure. But, you know, our position is there have been multiple attempts over the centuries that have failed. We have every confidence that we will succeed, but even if we didn't, we would have given it our best shot. My next slide shows the results of our SWOT analysis. Many of the strengths easily verifiable. The key weakness that the sugar industry is a money loser was one of the ones that was most revealing. And I'll just jump straight to the other slide because what basically when we went through in detail to analyze these, oh dear. When we went through in detail to analyze, what we found was that this was the most interesting one. Most of the others are you know, we recognize that there is a lack of confidence that we have to work on. There's a question of education and example and starting in small steps. There is a challenge with regulations and political roadblocks, which we're sure with given time and effort, we will overcome those. But let me move on to the one I really want to talk about. Is the Barbados sugar industry a loser? So the sugar industry comprises a number of phases. Obviously, the phase one is the planting and delivery of sugarcane to the factory. So if you look at my table, the bottom foundation shows farming, and it gives a breakdown of that operation. The second level, of course, is that you take the sugarcane from the planters, you grind, you produce sugar, and your output is sugar and molasses and the various byproducts. So that's the factory operations. After you produce the sugar, a key component is the wholesale and retailing of the operation, where you transform that sugar at the factory into a product on the shelf and into actual dollars income. So I call that wholesale and retail sugar. And then, of course, the byproducts, molasses, that before any extra work, we actually get molasses coming out as a byproduct. There's bagasse that comes out as a byproduct that we now know can be converted to energy. And of course, there's a very interesting rum industry that's extremely profitable in Barbados, extremely high value, but somehow seems to be divorced from the sugar industry when everyone is considering its profitability. Now let's look at these various sectors. So the cane farmers, according to our research, it costs under, this is $120 per ton of cane is an upper limit. Now that we've gone into mechanization, that number has fallen, but we have to do some new research to refine that. So it costs typically about $120 per ton at the most to produce sugar cane. Farmers get $150 per ton for the cane, plus what we call a climate mitigation bonus that could be up to $40, which could result in $190 per ton of every cane they produce. Typically, last year, for example, there was something like 109,000 tons of cane produced. So that the net profit from the farming community, you're talking about $7-8 million. Let's go to the factory. The people who do all the work, who take the cane, do all the processing, produce the sugar. The cost, sugar was being sold between 13 and 18. There were two brands of sugar, $1,300 and $1,800 per ton. It was being sold at the factory. This sugar was then sold to the wholesale retail market, put into packages, and retailed in the supermarket for something like 32 to 4,000 per ton. So you can see the profitability in the wholesale retail market was outstanding. And if you look at last year, for example, you're talking approaching $10 million in profit. And if you step back to the factory, based on the selling price and the operations that they had to go through to produce the sugar, they were talking about a loss. And this is a very, very conservative. I'm sure that maybe we just pull some basic figures together. For every ton of sugar, a loss of $1,300, with a net loss for the factory over $5 million. Over and above this, then there's the whole question of molasses, which is a byproduct that tend to be overlooked by many persons. But the truth is, the potential for growth in Barbados in molasses is significantly better. We are only doing about 10% of the local market now. And our molasses is actually in high demand because of a number of reasons, not the least of which is the geographic GI value for the rum industry. And if you forget all of that, the reason why the Co-op Energy became interested in this whole sugar industry in the first place was because of the potentiality from energy, which I have not even quantified here. Now, so basically the point I want to make is that the question as to whether growing and manufacturing sugar and its byproduct is profitable is a moot point. There's no question of the profitability. What went wrong in the past, and I can tell you, has already been significantly corrected and will be refined as we go forward, is the unrealistic and unfair use of the factory to support profits in all of the other areas of the business. Now, obviously, from a co-op point of view, our intent will be to make sure that this is all fairly distributed, not that everyone makes a fair profit, but the industry itself is definitely profitable. And this is even without delving into the energy component, which is what attracted us in the first place, the potential for expansion in molasses, and the unlimited potential for expansion in spirits. So significant changes have already been implemented even since 2020. And this started even before Co-op Energy became interested. And you saw that from the graph where you can see an upturn last year where there was a 38% increase in productivity. Even more reforms have since then been implemented. I mean, between December last year and now that we've been there for about 2 months or so. So that even before the implementation of our attractive renewable energy options, we are now projecting profitability from the sugar operations alone in the next 2 to 3 years. And even before that, the way things are actually looking. So there has been a significant turnaround, and I just kind of jot down some of the things that we've actually done and that we've already implemented and that we will be implementing to actually change that. Things like right sizing of staff, for example. Basically, what we did was to go through the operation, and the question was not, to be quite honest, how can we employ as many people as possible? And I guess this may have been a consideration in the past based on the previous ownership. But the question is, what is the right size and the right talents and the right people to make this operation as efficient as possible? And that's what drove the staffing, the reforms that we've done already, and we're in the process of doing it, so that we're actually working with staff, constantly meeting, and we intend to do even more intensely over the next couple of months to actually fine-tune what the staff need, what the operation needs, to make it as efficient as possible. And so far, I can tell you that the results have been very, very, very encouraging. We have been working with partners to maximize efficiency at all levels. Things like insurance costs and the staff involvement in operations. We've been already started to upgrade our financial systems in line with how we operate in the credit union now, with absolute standards of up-to-date, modern online information so you can make sensible decisions. The whole question of recapitalizing the factory, and obviously that's going to be a longer term exercise, but this is all well within train. So the way forward will be through innovation, and in the case of BESCO, that is going to be modernizing the factory, moving to renewable energy, increasing efficiencies, moving, for example, away from steam operations to more electricity-driven operations, far more efficient, far more computer controllable, far more precise, definitely more efficient. In the case of the farms, there is the opportunity because of the large-scale properties we own, especially in St. Lucie, that are not ideal for growing cane, not the most productive because of the rainfall situation, but turns out to be absolutely ideal for PV installations. So once the storage situation is sorted, that will be a prime opportunity to invest at cost that it will be very difficult for anyone else to match because we will be able to do it at utility scale. But also the opportunity to move into food crops in a big way, not just almost as an aside for the sugar industry as happened in the past. But our projections are that we will actually be moving significantly to improve what we call non-sugar agriculture. Also by growth, so not just by innovation, but by doing more of it, this is being driven by the calculations that we've done to make a meaningful contribution in the biofuel energy market requires an increase in not only the production of sugarcane, but the quality of the cane and the type of cane that we actually grow. So we've already done the research, and we've done a number of things that if we had the time, we could talk about things like hot water treatment to actually solve problems that we were having with disease, with rot disease and things like that. And we've seen this is one of the reasons that we saw the 38% increase last year, in fact. So this is not something we're doing new. This is something that was actually started by this new last BAMC team in the last couple of years that have already been bearing fruit. So this brings us now to the combination of where we are between co-op energy and the sugar investments. So what we've outlined here is our investment, what we call our investment projections. So now that we understand the operation a lot better, what we have been able to do is to put out an investment plan over the next 3 years or so that outlines the investment requirements and basically the financial projections of how we will be going. And the blue line seeks to identify the targets that we have set for investment. Now, the reason why we had to do this is because our key goal is not necessarily to attract large sums of money quickly. The truth is we've already turned down offers for significant investments mainly from overseas and interested persons who understand the value of the investment. Because our position is that takes us back to what we had before, and those all failed. So our intent and our target is to have large numbers of ordinary Barbadians make relatively small investments to create what we call a cooperative pool, to have the workers involved as investors and owners and shareholders, and to that be the avenue for our ongoing investment. Now, the problem with that strategy in Barbados is that it's going to take time and education and arguments and meetings. So we understand that. So we've given ourselves some time to actually bring this on board, and it fits well with our investment strategy. If we, for example, had a very large investment, now what it would do, we would find ourselves with a whole set of money sitting in the bank at no interest rate, just like happens, for example, with the credit unions, because it's going to take us time to ramp up to the investment levels that we are actually projecting. So it fits in very well with our investment targets and with the policy that we've taken to go for large numbers of small investors rather than significant investments from small groups of persons. So the R indicates where we are now. And basically what this says is that over the next month, we are targeting investments in the region of $4 to $6 million to fit exactly our growth schedule and our investment schedule. And we've been meeting. Our top priority, of course, is our credit union and co-op members, the people who actually created this. And we've actually had sessions with them to explain what we're doing and giving them a chance to actually review the plans and all that and to make their projections. The next step, of course, is to go to the public and invite public interest, which I guess with BAP we are starting to do. But BAP is special because BAP is also a founder member of Co-op Energy. So we tend to treat BAP like we treat the rest of the credit unions. So this gives you an idea of our growth schedule from an investment point of view. And we see this as an excellent opportunity to have meaningful returns. And right now we're guaranteeing on this $4 to $6 million we're targeting 4 to 5% return on that quite easily. And all our projections show that we can actually do that without any big stress. In terms of current investment options, and I'm talking especially now to BAP. BAP, as I said, is a founder member of Co-op. BAP was there in the initial stakeholder meetings. They were there when we took the decision to create Co-op Energy. They were there from the very, very beginning. And as you know, well, I obviously would have played a role as president of BAP. So as a founder member, BAP is a member of Co-op Energy, and as a member, they can actually buy shares, and they have actually bought, I think, nominal shares. But now that we have a project like this, if BAP as an organization, well, BAP, let me put on my other hat, BAP don't have a lot of money, so this is just wishful thinking. But BAP could, for example, make investments or deposits in this operation now that they have a good understanding of where it's going. And of course, when we meet with potential investors, I'm able to go into much more detail of the finances and the projections so that they understand what we're doing. When we meet with credit unions, we actually have significantly more detail than I'm able to share in a forum like this. Engineers themselves, as individuals, can become members of Co-op Energy. It is that kind of organization. Any Barbadian anywhere can actually become a full member of Co-op Energy and then be fully involved in everything that we do, can eligible to come on the board. The beauty of the cooperative ownership is the total transparency and the total openness to get involved, to know what's going on. And that we believe that's what it brings the strength to the cooperative movement. BAP can also coordinate a group investment plan if they wanted. So some members may be more comfortable to go into BAP and maybe putting in a couple $100 each, and then BAP then pool that money and do the investment in Co-op Energy and deal with their own members. The truth is we prefer that, because then instead of dealing with 1,000 different members, we can deal with just BAP and let BAP do all that hard work. But that's an option. And that is convenient for credit unions because they already have their members who know them well, who work with them every day, who are accustomed to dealing with them. So that kind of approach works very well with the credit union. Our aim, as I said before, is to create broad ownership by large numbers of persons who make small to moderate investments, and we call it cooperative ownership. This is actually very, very popular in other countries. 25% of the 100 largest utility companies in the US are actual cooperatives owned by the workers, the customers, the suppliers, the people who benefit from the operation are the owners of the operation. And as I said, 25% of the top largest ones in the US and an even larger percentage in Europe are full cooperatives. And annually, those co-op utilities tend to win the award for the best utility in the States because their focus tends to be to their customers who are their owners and their shareholders, more so than the privately owned operations. So the benefits are all members are eligible for representation at all levels of Co-op Energy Barbados. So once anything we invest in, you come to meetings, all the information is available. That's how credit unions operate. It is why credit union meetings are so messy and so noisy and so long, because there is full transparency. It is also why it is so secure, because everything that is done has to stand the scrutiny of total transparency. And that is what we are bringing to this market. And we suspect, and we are arguing that that is going to be the key to at last bring meaningful change to the sugar industry. Currently, we are in this initial phase, because we are in a phase now where we're trying to convince Barbadians that it makes sense to invest. It does not make a lot of sense to save all your money in the bank at 0%. Then for people who are willing to invest, to go to that same bank, take your money, invest it in things that will give them 10, 15% return. Meanwhile, the bank is giving you 0.1% on the money that they're actually using. So we feel that we have created an opportunity now for Barbadians, and you don't have to jump in with all the money that you want. You step in with a little bit just to get a feel for it. We are convinced that once you give it a try, you will see that there is no comparison between investing in safe, transparent operations as opposed to just pooling your money in a bank for other people to exploit. Co-op Energy will be very interested in discussing a full partnership with BAP or any other group. And this is similar to the project we've done with the car import, the electric and car import. We own 50% of that. And the intent there was to work with one of our members who do that, needed a partner to actually help him to do it better. We became that partner. When it becomes, when it becomes super successful, we are quite happy to step out, let that partner go forward when he's fully successful, and we'll invest in something else. That is the nature of cooperative ownership. And BAP or any interested group, we are open to discussions about any particular project that a person may want to do. It may well be related to sugar industry. So if you see something in the sugar industry now that is a specialty that you would want to get involved in, and you wanted to work with us on a 50-50 basis or some kind of basis where you could depend on Co-op Energy and the resources that we have been able to leverage to help you to be successful, even if only in the initial stages, we are more than open. That is what we are about. So as a general summary, in the medium to long term, Co-op Energy, we have identified initial investment opportunities of, well, to be quite honest, over $200 million and these are investments in energy that are guaranteed to generate returns in excess of 10% on investments. This is typical in the utility industry. If you listen to the ongoing rate case, what Light Power is arguing is that they need a return of 11.7% or something like that because of the nature of the business that they do, because they're into energy. That is the nature of energy investments. So when we get an opportunity to invest in energy projects, that is the kind of return that you actually get. And when the returns fall below that, as did happen in the Light Power, they will go to the FTC and say, oh, we're only getting 9%. You're going to have to look at rates again so we can get our agreed 10 or 11 or whatever is agreed. We are confident that we can pay significantly higher returns on deposits than is currently the case in the banking system. But that is no bragging because the banking system paid no return on deposits. They're actually exploiting savings for other people to make those kind of benefits. While we're doing so, we're offering full involvement and full transparency because this is the way that cooperatives operate. So when you invest here, for example, this is the offer we made in this initial stage. If we were to get a co-op or credit union or BAP to come in and bring a group of people in to do that initial investment, we are prepared to give them an opportunity to come on board and see everything that we're doing, to be full part of the board of directors, especially if they nominate someone with the kind of talents that we're looking for. And people like BAP and many of the credit unions have those kind of talents anyway. But the point is that transparency is key, and we are prepared. We understand that is the situation, and we focus on that. Our immediate objective, however, is to stabilize and build the foundation of the sugar industry, because it is on this that many of our future investments will depend. Sugar is going to be the key then, because if we can turn sugar around and make that successful, or I should say, when we do that, then it makes it so much easier when we put the energy component on top of that. Then there's going to be no question. We initially came in with the understanding that the energy component will make up for the losses in sugar. To be only pleasantly surprised that we may not even have to fall back to that. And then there's the sociology of this whole operation. As I said before, more than once, I think, for over 500 years, sugar has defined Barbados as a plantation top-down society, where a few wealthy landowners exploited the labor of thousands of quote-unquote workers for a minimum, and in some cases over the early centuries, no wages. Effective December 18th, 2023, because there is an entity called Co-op Energy, we have been able to create a situation where thousands of sugar workers, ordinary citizens, Barbadians in the diaspora, anyone who calls themselves a Barbadian can now become a shareholder and an investor in an entity that controls significant national assets and has the potential to be significantly successful because of energy and because of good management. No similar initiative have ever been tried in the sugar industry before, in all the history. It has always been privately owned, wealth-driven, rather than bottom-up, people-driven. I say if successful, but when successful, the implications for more such mass enfranchisement of citizens will be phenomenal in other areas. In the previous slide, I said we've identified over $200 million in investment. That's conservative. We have been approached now by a number of the larger projects who actually like the cooperative idea, and obviously they're incentivized by the fact that the government, as a matter of policy, has mandated that investments in renewable energy going forward in Barbados must have a significant local ownership content. And during the stakeholder sessions, we made the point that there were numerous operations in Barbados that had significant local ownership content, but are now 100% foreign owned. Don't let me go call names. Sagicor, Light Power, Cable and Wireless, Cable. I could call names for the rest of the night. And we made the point to them that the solution to this problem is cooperative ownership. When the local ownership is cooperative, the only way it's going to stop being local is if a significant majority of the individual owners get together in a meeting and agree to sell their birthright to foreigners. It will not be possible because a single person, even if he's the Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister, thinks that is a good idea to do it. So cooperative ownership we see as the solution to that problem, where extremely successful operations, like Sagicor, for example, beautiful operation, a model of what can happen in a small country in Barbados, but now owned lock, stock, and barrel, external to Barbados. Same thing with Simpson Motors. Exciting example of success, local success, but now no longer so. Co-op energy brings on board the reliance that not only can we be successful now and next year, but that 20 years from now and 30 years from now, it will still be a Barbadian operation. And in case you have doubts about that, there's an operation in Barbados called the Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited, a local insurance company owned by cooperatives, by credit unions, outstanding insurance company that is going to be Barbadian for as long as you can reckon, for that reason. So this is a national project. We know, for example, that the Barbados Co-op Energy alone cannot actually do this. We were put together to actually make it possible, and we have done that. We have created the environment. We've actually done the legwork, and the sugar industry presents step one to show that you can actually do it. We now need all hands on deck to actually make it work, to make it successful, and more importantly, to bring other operations on board in a similar manner. There are many countries in this world where cooperative ownership is the driver of success in those countries. And the difference is that when you have ownership spread among thousands and thousands of people, just as we've seen in the credit union movement in Barbados, that kind of success can come to productive enterprises. Together, we have the resources to make it happen. We just need the will and the self-confidence to move away from the old systems that did not work. Finally, the requirements for success, I would like to summarize in 4 steps. We needed the initiative, the creativity, and the opportunity to make something like this happen. And by creating Co-op Energy 5 years ago, the credit union and the co-op movement actually created that initiative, the creativity that we brought to the Plantation Society of Barbados, and we've demonstrated that it can work. We need, obviously, support and investment, and we need this by convincing Barbadians to make the necessary small inputs collectively, that because you have to, the sugar industry will work, but the factory needs to be invested in. We need new equipment. We need to electrify. We cannot continue with the 1950s steam type operation. So we need the investment. The introduction of the oversight and transparency, where there are no secrets, there are no hidden agreements, there are no underhand operations. That is the way it works in the movement. Because there's something called the supervisory committee, there's something called the registrar, there's something called the FSC, who will be inspecting every single transaction on a routine basis, who know exactly what to look for, and therefore you don't do foolishness in the first place. That oversight and transparency brings a level of professionalism that is needed in Barbados. And we believe that this approach does that. And lastly, but certainly in this environment, I think most importantly, why we got the AP involved from the very beginning, why we focus on their involvement, technical and professional oversight, so that you do things the right way professionally. You solve problems up front and you do it right the first time. This propensity we have in Barbados to try a thing, and if it don't work, try another thing and then try something else is nonsense. There's no room for that in the 21st century. So what we need is the professional people who are trained to do this, to do all their jiggernauting on their computer, and to do all their tests on screen. And then before I spend a cent in investment, they tell me what is going to work, how it's going to work, how much profit I will make after the first year and the second year, and stake their reputation on it. These are the 4 requirements that we see for success. The question is, can we anticipate your participation? And I put this to BAPE and, well, to every one of you watching tonight. I hope I haven't gone past my time, but I probably did, but forgive me. Thank you.
You're good. Thank you very much. I think that was a very informative presentation. Certainly a lot of information went out there just now. We want to open up the floor at this stage for questions. Colonel Browne is available for questions. So I see right off the bat, you have Ramon Jules. Ramon, you can unmute and answer your question. Ramon, you can unmute. Go ahead.
Hi, good night, Vincent, and good night to my fellow engineers.
Good night.
Hey, Ramon.
So the question I have, Trevor, so you're asking ordinary Barbadians to invest, and You've touted some return on investment figures in the region of 4.5% and as high as 10% if you have greater groups of people coming together to pool their investments. What I would have liked to have seen to better convince me of the profitability of the model that you've currently illustrated is that slide that you had, which showed the profitability of the cane farmers versus the unprofitability of the factory operations, could have been buttressed with projections of where you expect to be at the end of this year's crop harvest as it relates to the profits on molasses and any potential profits on energy. Because given that the factory operations is the backbone of, I would assume, creating the energy and producing all of the byproducts like molasses that you can make money off of. If I'm starting off with a loss-making factory operation, how can I be confident that this thing can be turned around effectively?
Okay, Roman, that's actually an excellent question. And actually, there is an answer for that. And we do have all those projections. Actually, I have to call a couple of names in talking about what made this all possible. Ambassador Dr. Maskell, the chairman of BAMC, a phenomenal person. A man, I am an engineer and I like mathematics and I like numbers, but there's something wrong with Dr. Maskell when it comes to numbers. It is obvious that his brain operates a different way to most other people. And I can tell you that we have done he's done all of those. We actually have a very clear indication of what profitability will be at the end of this year. In fact, at the end of next month, and the month after that, and the month after that. And more importantly, because we have that kind of information, we have made significant changes to a number of things. So if you were familiar with the sugar market, for example, you would know that a number of new brands have come on the market. The whole way that we do our wholesaling and retailing has completely been reviewed over the last couple of weeks and months. So that is now completely different to what happened in the past that you would have seen in the slide. So all that information is available. But one of the problems I did mention that this is what I'm giving you is just a bare bones kind of presentation of where we are. It would take me the whole day to go into the kind of detail that we need to go into. So when I have meetings with credit unions, for example, who are interested in investment, and they have these kind of interests, when we present it obviously will take a lot more time to do a presentation. You know, you're talking 3 or 4 hours at least. But we do have that information, and it is very precise information, and we have already made changes to operations that are already seeing bottom line changes to our bank account, for example, which is why we could do that projection and tell you what our investment needs are over the next couple of years, months and years, because we have made changes to the projections and we are seeing changes to the income to the factory, for example. So we have actually made a number of significant changes. And the interesting thing is we have been able to do that without impacting the price at the supermarket shelf. So all that we have done is actually redistributed the profitability across the various sectors. Obviously, not everyone's going to be happy, because if you were making, for example, the kind of returns that they were being made in the wholesale section before, you may think that, you know, well, what these people come to do. But if you take an overall look from a national point of view, and certainly from the factory point of view, I think you will understand what we've done and why we had to do it. So the answer to your question is the information is available. And if you're interested in making that $4 million deposit, Ramon, we'd be happy to give you access. In fact, we'll bring you fully on board and show you all of the information and convert you into a preacher like me.
Thank you very much, Ramon, for your question. We have a couple other questions coming at you, Colonel. So we had Phil Lashley. He has a question in the chat, but he also has his hand up. So Phil, you can unmute and engage Trevor, please.
Hi, pleasant good afternoon, Engineer Browne.
Hi,
This is really heartening stuff for a Barbadian to sit and listen to. Outside of that, I was asking about the challenges of cane stunting, if that had been addressed. And I would also end by saying, I truly am looking forward to being at that stage where I could say, yeah, hold this, that I might become a shareholder.
Great. Thank you for the question. And yes, you're right. Cane stunting was one of the major problems. Fortunately for us, when we came on board, the Bay MC team had already identified the problem, identified the solution, and have on a large scale been applying the solution. And as I said, this is one of the major factors in the increased productivity last in 2023. It is the solution is called, as you said, is cane stunting. It's called by a kind of root rot. There's some people on the Zoom that have obviously far better information beyond these details, but there's a hot water treatment that they've developed where they treat the plantings before they actually plant, that actually solves that problem. So now you find that the new canes that are being planted out that have been hot water treated no longer suffer from that root rot, and we're getting far, far better productivity. So obviously it's going to take us a couple of years to actually go through and transform all the plantings to the new variety or to the treated variety. But that problem has been identified, solved, and the solution is now being implemented on a large scale.
Okay, Maggie Campbell from Mount Gay. Maggie, I'm looking forward to an email from you to organize the tour that we have spoken about last year. Now that I've seen you tonight, you haven't forgotten. You can unmute and have a chat with Trevor.
Hey, good evening, and congratulations on your new adventure, Trevor. It's very
Good evening, thank
exciting.
you.
May I ask how you see the potential of molasses fitting in with your future focus on energy? Will the focus on energy production have any risk for reducing the potential of molasses production?
Excellent question again. And actually, my learning in this has been phenomenal. So initially, to us, molasses was a byproduct that was, well, neither here nor there. And obviously, our focus was on energy. Now, what we've come to realize is that because of our energy focus, there is actually going to be an increased production of molasses and of high quality molasses. The dilemma, of course, is that high quality molasses comes from inefficiency of the inefficiency of the factory in converting the sugar. Because we're not converting at as high a level as we should, the molasses tend to be high quality. But right now we only supply 10% of the local market for molasses. And the nature of the rum industry, as you know, the opportunity to benefit from the GI designation presents a significant opportunity for local molasses to actually be used by the local rum industry to improve the value of their brand. And because our target for energy requires increased planting, and this increased planting is also being spurred by some recent initiative. You may notice that government recently had an initiative to almost penalize people who do not plant sugar lands. The intent being that it has an impact on the presentation, on the cost of then debushing and all that. So there is an incentive to plant more. We are interested in planting more because of the energy. And as a result, there is going to be significant increases in molasses. But we are happy to say that because we now only touch about 10% of the local market, the opportunity for improvements and for profitability from molasses is even more significant than for increasing production of sugar, because we already have 100% of the local market. And as you know, when you go into the international market, then you have to compete at international prices. So the opportunity in molasses is actually phenomenal. So we do have some meetings coming up with your people.
We would absolutely love to work hand in hand with you on this. We agree with you. The growing of cane is so good for, retaining water in the soil, so many ecological benefits, and for the rum industry, such a benefit. So yeah, feel free to get my email from
actually Mr. Monroe is going to be contacting you fairly shortly because we have discussed having a talk with you about how we go forward together.
Yeah, we would love to have you come up and visit. And we have our tiny micro mill that can't do much,
yes,
but when you guys thrive, we thrive. It's a good thing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. And Vincent, she did raise the question about the ecological benefit of growing sugarcane. Now, I wasn't aware of this before, but the truth is from a climate change mitigation situation, to the extent that we actually grow sugarcane in Barbados on a large scale, actually has a carbon benefit. I don't know if I'm not beginning to understand about that. Right.
Yeah, so, for us, it's the reduction in erosion, putting water back into the water table. And then when we transport molasses locally, the carbon footprint of that molasses is much lower than when we import it from overseas.
Absolutely right, right.
Yeah. And just to add some value to what you guys were discussing, Trevor, the total exports right now on molasses is valued in the region of $1.24 billion internationally. With India cornering the market at 21.3%. So that gives you an idea as a byproduct, molasses alone, what that can potentially offer the local industry.
Oh, yes, there's no
So
question about
that's and that's a byproduct. So any other questions? I want to encourage you guys to jump in, ask some questions. Don't be shy. So Trevor, while we wait for persons to get their thoughts together, perhaps your presentations were so conclusive that you've answered some of the questions
Or
that we
so
might have had.
confusing. Or so
But
confusing.
we are now speaking about a sugarcane industry and not just a sugar industry. I would assume that is where the company will be looking to diversify eventually in the long term what is done not only in terms of the byproducts but also energy generation. What does that look like in terms of your projections? What type of diversity are you getting into? Because if I look at yesterday's prices on the International Sugar Organization's pricing index, you have about sugar being sold at 25 US cents per pound, whereas white sugar is being sold at 29.59 cents per pound. So the value added in terms of the refined sugar is higher. Is Barbados looking to get into refined sugars down the road?
Vincent, in terms of the opportunities for further investment of the industry, the truth is, it is almost frightening. The sky is the limit. So to start at the beginning, first of all, whereas before our sugar industry was, if you look at a stock of cane, basically what we saw was some sugar coming out, some molasses, and then some leftover products, mud and bubble gas and things like that, that either you can use for chicken feed or to heat the boilers or something like that. Now, the introduction of energy transformed the way you look at that basic piece of cane. Because now what you're saying is sugar, molasses, but no energy. And if you understand the value of energy, and even if you just look in terms of substituting imported fossil fuel, as I tell you, last year it's almost $1 billion we spent, and we bought some oil that somebody dug up from the ground, bought it to Barbados, paid $1 billion for it, and burnt it to get heat to produce energy. We can grow our own bagasse. And some people even thought about cane grass and other maiamaci and some other things. So we can produce a local product that can actually replace a significant proportion of the imported fossil fuel. So that puts a whole new light on it. So I had a meeting today with some of the private farmers, for example, and we fully understand that as we go forward, even the way we remunerate them for the cane that they grow is going to have, down the road, have to include the value now as an energy component. But then spoke about molasses only today. We have treated molasses as just like an extra thing that the rum industry happen to want. We import 90% of the molasses that we use in Barbados. You realize that? 90%. We actually pay, like those same people that you mentioned in India, we actually buy their molasses. Mm-hmm. We have the opportunity to actually replace a lot of that with higher quality local molasses with a better carbon footprint. Over and above that, molasses has some medicinal. I don't know if you go to somewhere, you see a little ball of molasses that people use for medicinal reasons.
It's a grandmother child, Trevor, so you know about molasses well.
Yeah, you will know about that, right? There's nothing to stop us from, the market. So if somebody came to us, for example, who was interested in developing a line like that for shakes, you see what I'm saying? So the opportunity,
the value added.
Right. The value added, the opportunity for all kind of value added products is what we can think of. And now that once we have the foothold and the way that Co-op Energy is configured, we are open to people coming with ideas that we may not even have thought about, and we will work with them to make it work.
Great. I saw
Stephen had his hand up.
Yeah, I saw Stephen his hand up just now. Stephen, you want to engage, please?
Well, I put my hand up because good afternoon, and again, Trevor and Vincent and all online. Yeah, I had my hand up to sort of maybe emphasize for you to emphasize a little bit on energy, which you just did. So, but I just say that from I've seen Trevor, you and I have had discussions over time, and I was very pleased to see the development of everything as it has come up, and I just I think it was Phil that Lashley that meant, sorry, it was Ramon, the first question. I think that chart or table that he was suggesting, I think would be very useful for investors down the road. But it sounds like you have that in train for the larger investors. But I think for the smaller investor to get some confidence, and I think that's who you're targeting in a large way. I think you need to sort of try to put some numbers to these different opportunities. They may or may not work out, and I know you have been very conservative in your numbers already. So if you use conservative numbers, it would give a good indicator. But I think overall, what I've seen is that from this whole project is the benefit to energy is tremendous. The benefit to the country is tremendous because of all of we talked about ecological benefits of sugarcane. So the real challenge, I think, for you is to get all of those efficiencies that you've highlighted. And based on all of what I've heard, you're a long way into that process. So I think the key thing now is really to build that confidence, both internally, as you identified as a weakness in the co-op area, but also within the investor community of the individual co-op members, that they start putting the money together, because I suspect you're going to need a lot of that in the coming months to improve the efficiencies to the levels that you're planning to do. So I want to encourage you and thank you for the presentation this afternoon. And anything else you can mention on the energy side and what alternatives to energy, the bagases, because I know bagasse is used for other purposes now, and they're free. I think the farmers expect it free. So the question really, would you have some of that available to them as well, and how that will be dealt with?
Right. Thanks, Stephen, for your usual probing questions like that. And you're right. The challenge that we actually, well, first of all, it is less than 2 months that we've actually been in charge of this operation. Prior to December 18th, it was only on December 18th that Cabinet actually made the final decision that this is going to go ahead. So before that, we had to speak in speculative terms and couldn't make meaningful decisions, for example. So understand that all that I'm saying, it is only in the last 2 months that we have been in a position to actually make management take decisions and to change things around and all that. Now, in the cooperative movement, the first thing I need to do, obviously, is to get my members on board, the people who actually put me here, who vote for me. So we spent lots and lots of time with meetings, going into those extreme detail as to how this is going to work. And we've managed to actually get them on board, generally speaking, for that. And so we're now on to the phase where we can go beyond that. And as I said, BAP is probably the first step because they are members, although not in the cooperative movement. So the next step now is to actually go public and to do the kind of things that Ramon has been asking. The other problem, of course, is that we are now a private entity. And one of the things, for example, that I will be doing is we have to do is negotiate with other stakeholders in the business. So coming up very shortly will be a major negotiation with the cane farmers, for example, as to how are we going to go forward with paying for cane and working out the price and transporting them and all that. As a businessman, I still need to keep a couple of cards in my back pocket, if you understand what I mean. So whereas in my criteria meetings and with my stakeholders, I obviously can take one approach. When I go publicly, I have to remember that there are some people that I actually have to negotiate with. If I tell them that, well, how well we're doing, they may say, "Oh, is that really true, Browne?" Well, but surely then this is what you're gonna have to pay, or I'm not taking less than that. So we do have some positions that we have to maintain, and everybody understands that. But I must tell you that to the extent that we can sit down in a little group, this is such an exciting project. We actually probably talk too much about it. But it is really exciting, and the work that Ambassador Maskell and his team has done to actually provide the information so you can make management decisions is what is particularly impressive to me, to be quite honest. And we intend to build on that and to follow that approach as we develop the business. So far, I must tell you that it is exceeded, personally, my expectation of what we had hoped for. It is better than the best that we had hoped for. That's the truth.
Okay, we have a question in the chat from Justin Leslie. He was asking about the possibility of generating methane gas, vehicle fuel. I mean, I guess that would be ethanol. And what does it cost to join Cooperative Energy as an investor?
Oh, it costs $100 to join Co-op Energy. That's simple. One-time cost of $100, and you can actually go online and do that tonight. One of the bylaws of Co-op Energy is that we require members to have at least $1,000 in shares, and they have a year in which to do that. So you can pay $100 and join, and then you can put in $100 a month or something, and in 10 months, you're a full paid member. You don't have to do a single thing after that. Of course, someone like Justin may want to come in and make a $2 million investment because that really means nothing to him. So I mean, he could afford to do that. The average person like me, well, not so much you, Vincent, either, but average person, whatever you can afford this. So if you have a $200 that you want to invest, you can then just go and you can make your investment. And because a lot of this developed during COVID, we actually, all our systems are actually online. So you can do everything online. You can, your share certificate, all that is available online. All your transaction receipts and all that are all online. So we actually have members in Canada who are full members of Barbados, who live in Canada, who are full members and who fully participate in everything that we actually do. So that was one of the objectives when we set up during the COVID period, to make it such that you can actually operate like that. But in answer to the question about the methane, as I said, the more that I get exposed to this, the more I realize that there are no limits to what you can actually do. So from alcohol, there are all sorts of things that can happen. So, okay, so you have obviously the specialty rums and all that, extremely valuable to Barbados. But then there's the opportunity for methane type operations. And as you know, the university doing some research with sargassum to produce fuel. So if all we need is someone with the interest and the expertise to develop a business plan, and if we can work with them along through the sugar industry to make that work, we are interested. We're interested in discussing it, and if the numbers work out, we are fully on board with that.
Fantastic. So before we go to the next question, Trevor, I just want to support you on the sugarcane diversity, or the sugarcane industry diversity. You would have mentioned rum, and in 2022, the market share of rum was estimated to be US $16.8 billion. 2023, it was up to 17.4 billion US dollars. There's no projection of between last year and the next 10 years that is going to increase by 3.5%. So by 2033, we're looking at a market value of $24.5 billion in rum spirits. And that's nothing to snub your nose at. And I think this is where the importance of that geographical indicator really comes in, and Barbados staking its claim in the rum market. Because if you go online enough and you do research, as I have had to for preparation, you see all sorts of people banning about being the original producer of rum. Right. So Cuba said they were the original producer of rum, and this body and that body. And I think it really becomes important that we stake our claim and reap the benefits of staking that claim. So how important, Trevor, is this geographical indicator? I mean, is this something that Co-op Energy, along with the rum producers, will be looking at seriously getting sorted out?
So when we spoke about that meeting coming up between us and the rum producers, one of the problems that we have in Barbados is we seem to tend to define ourselves out of relevance. In other words, how do you have a sugar industry in Barbados and isolate yourself from the extremely impactful and successful rum industry that win awards across the world every year, that have a reputation for a serious reputation for being the source of rum in the first place, the producer of the highest quality rums consistently. How do you divorce that from a sugar industry and say the sugar industry is losing money, but this rum industry is phenomenally successful, phenomenally wealthy? So why are we not sitting down with them to see how we can work with them to make it even more successful, and at the same time make the factory more successful, the planters more successful, and the country more successful? So these are the kind of interactions that we're actually having with all the various stakeholders now. And as you say, the problem, I think, is in the past, we defined the sugar industry as the factory operations. We configured it in such a way that it was a loser. And that seems to me like it was a political decision. I mean, when I say political, I mean in the generic term, meaning of the term, that somebody decided that the factory has a sell sugar at $1,300 a ton. And that is still like that for many, many years, even when the retail price went up significantly.
Yeah.
That made no sense whatsoever. So just by widening the definition of the sugar industry, you can see that we are not talking about a loser, we are talking about a world beater. Yeah. And we just have to work with all these stakeholders to make sure that that what we do makes sense. And that's what we're actually trying to do now.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, Trevor, because we're currently at just about 23, 24 cents pound, and that's significantly high. I think one of the highest rates over the last 40 years was in the 70s when you were getting 60 cents a pound on the world market.
But you saw what happened to the price of sugar on the world market in the last months?
Yes, because
after the heat wave, exactly.
After the heat wave, and India has cut back sugar exports, so that's really triggered a rise in world prices. So obviously the industry is profitable, as you said. And before we get into the questions, I just want to give persons a very rough idea of the type of byproducts that potentially could come out of this industry. I think Stephen mentioned about bagasse, and from bagasse alone, you can get paper, particle board, cattle feed. If you looked at molasses-based industries, you can get ethanol, ethylene, citric acid, lactic acid, cattle feed, baker's yeast, monosodium glutamate.
The sky is the limit.
Lysine. I mean, it goes on and on. So if we really start to drill down, as you're saying, into the potential of what this industry can offer Barbados at an industrial base, it is phenomenal. And you have the support there of the profit margin on the world scene. So let's go to a question here from Henry St. John. He's asking, what are the plans for the bulk sugar terminal and bond at the port?
To be determined. There are a number of assets around the island that we now have to determine how they will be deployed. Because as you know, we no longer do bulk sugar exports, for example. So and even like the management of the storage of molasses at the port, there are a number of things that, but keep remembering, this is not 2 months yet. So we have not been in position for 2 months. It's fortunate for us, Ambassador Maskell and his team has done outstanding work that we were able to take and run with. But we haven't been around really long. And the truth is, most of those 6 weeks that we've been here have been taken up with making sure that the serious crop is going to be successful. Yeah. Preparing for the crop. So in terms of planning for the bulk storage and all that.
Stephen, I'm coming to you shortly. But there's a question by Andy Eversley. Andy asks, do you have the financing to meet your capital expenditure plans over the next 3 years?
No. We have plans to raise it. And we have, or let me answer it this way. We could have had all the financing we want up front. We have had offers from more than one, generally overseas investors who are aware of the project and who offered up front to capitalize it for us. But that goes against the fundamental objective that we have set to make this a cooperative investment project. So our target is for large numbers of people to make small investment. We recognize it's going to take a while for people to come on board. Fortunately, as our investment projections indicate, the going operation is such that properly managed, now that we've cut down on a number of ridiculous losses, we have actually improved on the income by making a sensible adjustments to the price at the factory for sugar, for example. So we will be able to meet our investment requirements according to that chart that I demonstrated. And we have been working with credit unions who are interested in investing. The problem with credit unions, of course, is that a number of regulatory issues that they want to make sure that they cross all the, that's why I like credit unions and co-ops. They make sure they cross all the T's and dot all the I's because they know somebody can get up in the meeting and expose everything that they do. So they make sure they do it right the first time. So we know it's going to take us a little while to get that in place, and that is in train. But in terms of raising the investments, we are pretty confident that the investments that we require, we will be able to raise in the time frame.
Okay, thank you for that. Stephen?
Yeah, Vincent, you raised a point, some good points about the opportunities, and you know, Trevor's come across very optimistic, and I think he has good reason to be. As I said, having followed this for a little while, I was not as optimistic as he was. But I think as time goes on, I'm becoming more and more convinced of that this can work. But I think those opportunities always existed. I think the challenge really has been is that we have had no one really treating the sugar industry in a way that it seems to be now being looked at by the Co-op Energy. And I think that, as Trevor mentioned, having the opportunity to listen to Clyde Maskell and his analysis, I agree with Trevor. Whenever he uses numbers in ways that many of us, even as engineers, never thought about using them. But the point really is, I think it's given a level of confidence to many have listened to this, that just by looking beyond what we traditionally have done, there are many opportunities we can benefit from them, but each of them has costs. And I think it's not that the opportunities are there, but what really makes sense for us. And I see Trevor, as he's talking about it, taking some small, they took one big step to the transition, but I think they're looking at smaller steps to make sure that they don't get out of their league before they don't start running before they crawl. And I think that's a good approach, Trevor. I think as I see it, while you've taken this big step, you're not sort of just running ahead of yourself. So I think it's good to talk about the opportunities, but it's good, as you explained to me in my question, you know, not to put everything on the table for everyone to see, because there's so many different directions. Just need to have enough to build confidence that it's going to work. And I think you're continuing to do that with these presentations. So good luck to you and your team.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, Trevor, we're coming down to the finish line. You did mention the labor and the factory costs. Obviously, Portville is not a young factory, and it was not a spanking new factory when it was open.
True.
What is the plan in terms of upgrading the plant? Is it that you will first get the industry to a point of profitability and then look to invest in a new plant, or you're going to make incremental improvements at the plant?
Well, we had an initial plan when we tried to justify the project, and that initial plan really was, our thinking was that the sugar thing was a waste of time. You can lose money on that, but it gave you the foundation to build the energy component, which would be successful. And the intent then was what we developed a model that looked at raising capital through the equity, to upgrade boilers to improve efficiency, to electrify the operations so that rather than steam operations, it'd be electrically driven completely in the factory, to modernize the factory, so to speak. And so when I initially spoke about this, I took a lot of licks on my board because I mentioned, I think it was on Brass Tacks or something, I mentioned saying like $100 million investment. And everybody thought that this is what you were asking the credit unions to put in or something like that. But basically, this included the equity that would be required over the next 3 years to upgrade boilers, upgrade efficiency, so that, for example, rather than using 16 tons of bagasse to produce a fixed amount of electricity, with increased efficiency, we can now do that with 7 or 8 tons by significant increases in efficiency. And actually, the upgrade of the factory, in fact, as you correctly said, in fact, it's called the old man now, because everything is old and it requires a special level of expertise to keep it working. And we're lucky to have the kind of staff that not only able to do that, but actually seem to enjoy doing it. So, but that is something that the plan is over the next 3 years that the factory will be upgraded. Now, that was the original plan. As it has turned out, the way things are looking from the sugar and molasses operations alone, we may be able to accelerate that process. And especially if we're able to get, if we have interest in investments at a higher level than we have projected, then we could actually fast forward the upgrade to the factory rather than, because we were trying to spread it over 3 years from a financing point of view to make sure everything worked. But the finances, the projected finances have improved to the extent that we may be able to fast track that. So we're looking again at the whole investment program that we have in mind. But still remember, it's only 2 months that we've been at it. So yeah.
The Trevor, it would be remiss of me on an engineering program not to, number one, pay homage to, as you said, the professionals that you have at the factory that have kept that factory going for such a long period of time. And I guess operational pretty much to meet the demands of the crop. Can you, for those of us who may not be aware, because even I wasn't fully aware of the type of technical staff that the sugar industry employs and what that means to the employment of skilled artisans, professionals in Barbados. Can you give an oversight of those particular skill sets that exist within the industry, which brings value to Barbados and employment opportunities, not only in the engineering or the engineering technician field, but in other areas as well?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because one of our engineers, Bruce Gopal, I think he's actually on the call now. He plays a significant role down there. He's one of the members of BAP. And I myself, obviously I've been knocking around the factory now for recently, quite more than usual. And I must say, the level of workmanship the level of skills that they have on board and the kind of work that they do and the kind of enthusiasm that I see is I never expected anything like that, to be quite honest. And we do have a number of highly professional people. I mean, in ABC, for example, we have I think it must be the only farm in Barbados that is actually managed by a fully trained professional agronomist. And the kind of work that he do and the kind of knowledge that drips off his tongue and off his finger is actually phenomenal, to know that you have that kind of resource to call on. At the factory, you have Mr. Monroe and, as I said, Mr. Gopal, and a team of professionals that continue to impress me. And if you know me long enough, Vincent, you know that professionally, it's not easy, and it's not always easy to impress. I have been unduly impressed with the professionalism, the commitment, and the kind of work that they have been doing over there. And as you walk through like right now, we're going through the final stages of changing all the tubes in boiler number 2 in preparation for this crop. I mean, they're long overdue. This should have been changed about 5 years ago. But because of financial constraints and management challenges and all that, we have to change them now to make sure that we get through this crop. But the work, I mean, the way they're going about it, and when you talk to the people in charge and how they're going about it, and the way they've laid out and planned the work, very, very, very impressive. But I am looking forward to seeing how this operation is going to work in an environment like the one I'm accustomed to at Lightning Power, for example, where you actually have capital plans. You know what you're going to be doing for the next year. You get the equipment. They have a situation where sometimes you need a basic part, but you only get the part the week before the crop starts, for example, because of financial reason or some kind of administrative reason. I mean, that is not the kind of engineering that we are familiar with. So when we get the chance to bring these kind of resources to the skills that we have in the factory, I am pretty sure that we are going to be amazed at the results that we will actually get.
I mean, Trevor, I was so impressed when I went there to realize the workshop that the guys have there and what they can produce is phenomenal.
Exactly,
I mean,
right.
There's no other industry currently in Barbados that has that sort of input, where if you have to make parts, that you have skilled workmen who can actually make the parts there on the ground. And I think you know, that the skill set that is required, I think that argues well for Barbados in industry. And it's really something that we would want to hold on to as long as we can, because it really offers our young people opportunities outside of Barbados.
That's right. And I take the lift, for example. There's a massive lift down there. I understand that sometimes people like Ramon and the other fellows from Lightning Power would on occasion ask to use it because they do have access to impressive equipment. But the circumstances in which they work is what is impressive, because I mean, when compared to what, for example, is at Spring Garden, is like chalk and cheese, to be quite honest. But the fact that they're able to make that work the way they make it work is actually impressive. And the more you understand engineering, the more impressed you have to be with the results that they get with what they have. So I'm looking forward to when they actually have access to modern equipment, modern technology, and modern support. I actually think the results will be really outstanding. I'm
Great.
looking forward to that.
All right, we have what will be our final question for the night from Andy Eversley. And Andy's asked, is $120 the direct cost for cane production at the field level across the industry or at ABC or private firms?
My understanding is that this was the result of a study that was done a couple of years ago before full mechanization to try. Actually, well, you probably realized from my early presentation that the sugar industry is one of the most studied industries in Barbados. We've had all kinds of experts from all over the place come down at great expense to come up with strategic plans, studies, reforms, and all kinds of things to improve the industry. So there are lots of reports and studies, and based on my best information, it was best estimate we had for the cost to a planter to produce a ton of sugarcane based on the cost of land, the cost of water, the cost of labor, that kind of way. 100 at that time, it looked like about $120 per ton. We would estimate that would have gone down a bit because of mechanization. Because now, as you know, you can get a harvester, and once you've capitalized that and you've had it for a couple of years, you run through a field in 2 days. That would have taken you a couple of weeks with labor and transport and all kinds of things. So there's the need to upgrade that information, but that was just a ballpark figure I used. But all these figures I use are ballpark, so that the losses at the factory are actually more than $1,300 per ton, to be quite honest. We just pulled a number of figures out and said, well, okay, this is just indicative of the fact that there were discrepancies in the way we defined the sugar industry. And when we define it to include the high value things like rum, energy, molasses, there's a whole new picture that arises, and that is our intent. So we intend to work with the rum people to work to make them even more successful, but we also to be more successful, to work with the energy people to make them, to save them in foreign exchange with fossil fuels, but also to make the factory more successful and more profitable. So we intend to build synergies with our stakeholders to make everybody better off than they are now. And we feel we can do that.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel, we want to thank you so much for sharing with us this evening. It's been a very informative session. I think eventually the session will be available on the BAPE website for those of you who might have missed some of it. And some of these slides may also be available there. And I think if you would also check the Co-op Energy website, you may find some of this information there as well. So you have 2 avenues in which to check out the information. Colonel, just as a reminder to everybody who's here, I've recently signed up, but can you remind everybody how to get involved in Co-op Energy?
Well, everybody should really get involved in Co-op Energy, even as a token thing. So basically what we're asking is for every Barbadian anyway, you can just go online, coopenergy.org, and there are multiple ways to join. I mean, if you want to be really, really lazy, don't even go online. Just send us email with your name and address and stuff. And online, we tell you what information. We need some basic, we need to know that you're a Barbadian. We need to know that you're over 16. So we want to see your ID card. So you take a picture of your ID card and you send us that. You send us your name and address and basic information, and we will follow the application form for you. But once you can also go online and do it online, and the system will respond to you with an email and tell you how you can make your $100 payment and your share payment and all that. You can. We've had people do it in 15 minutes from scratch. You go on, you get your email, you respond, and you're a member. So everybody should really join. We actually feel that this is an opportunity to transform the ownership paradigm in Barbados, to make all Barbadians feel as though they're part of Barbados. There are many countries in the world where cooperatives dominate, and people feel a sense of ownership that you probably feel a bit of that in the credit union movement now. We want to expand that to the productive sector. And if this works, when it works, we can see this happening in a number of other areas, in multiple other areas. The sky is the limit. But step one, come and join us, get more information, get involved, come and, I mean, I'm actually supposed to be retired. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I need some younger people now to come and take and make this happen. A group of us old fellas, myself and Uriel Doyle and Holly Haynes, 5 years ago, we said that we would do our part and bring it to this point and let the youngsters take it and run with it. We feel we've actually taken it to the point now where it is pretty much established. And especially in organizations like BAP, where there are people with immense talents, a lot to contribute, really young people that really can make a difference. We are looking forward to getting people involved. So first step is to come and join the co-op, $100, and we're off and running.
Thank you, Colonel Browne. And just to let our BAPE members know that down the road, we haven't established a date as yet that we are hoping to do a tour of the factory once it's up and running. But obviously those details and logistics are to be determined, so you can keep an eye out for that. And I think for those of you who have never done a sugar factory tour, I think you will be really amazed, as I had said earlier, at the skill set that is required to keep that operation going and what is available there in terms of skill set and what we do at Portville. So when that comes, I would hope that you support that effort and come out and do the tour. So just a quick reminder of some notes from earlier on. Members of BAP, you are reminded to pay your membership dues. It is time. It's the beginning of the year. We want to get those membership dues in. They help to run the organization, keep the office going. So please, if you haven't, we'll ask that you can please pay your membership dues. You can do that online or you can go into the office. There are several means, whichever one works best for you. We are looking for sponsors to support our various efforts throughout the year. So if this is something that you're interested or your company is interested in doing and partnering with us, please reach out to Stacy at the office. We are looking for partners, particularly in this year, our 60th anniversary, where we'll be having several celebrations coming up in September and October. We do have, Kenton, if you can put up the 2 flyers. We do have 2 upcoming events as well. We have the tour to Preconco, which will be coming up in the first week of March. And we have the trip to Panama. For those of you who are interested in taking that tour to Panama, there are, I think as of today, 9 or 10 persons who have signed up for the trip so far. But an opportunity to actually visit the Panama Canal and have an appreciation of the engineering around that would be a fantastic opportunity for those of you who can afford to do such. That tour is scheduled from the 27th of April to the 4th of May, and there are still some spots available. If you are interested, don't waste time. Please reach out to the travel agent as soon as you can. So that's it for tonight's session. I look forward to seeing you again next month in our next session, and you will see the flyer come out for that by next week of what we have to offer you. I will just give you a hint. It's going to be along the project management line. So those of you who are doing project management in your day-to-day activities or any sort of general management, that webinar will probably be of interest to you. So thank you again, and I bid you good night.